Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote I picked just special for this podcast. Here it is. Markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. John Maynard Keynes. See, we believe here at Culture Matters. When people read to think, write to develop, listen to hear what is unsaid, and speak to let go, they develop more value for themselves and others. So our purpose of this podcast is to uncover the genius of our guest with the goal to make you, the listener, your curiosity cool. Because our vision is that human culture is open, curious, and focused on creating the future. So our mission is to read, write, listen, and speak every single day. I'm excited to introduce you to our guest, a repeat guest, one of many to come, Phil Mancuso, episode 110, season 10. Listen to that after this or before this or again and again. Phil is a mortgage market maker. If you don't know what that is, Google that, look that up. For the last just about 2+ decades, he's been creating value in the market.
1988.
88, creating value in the market. Now I'm on my toes. I love Phil. So stakeholder and partner at EPM, El Presidente of Appraisal Nation. Truly a genius of the highest rank, and I love him dearly. You're going to love him. We talk about this today. Phil, thank you so much for thanks for coming to the podcast, and thanks for correcting me too, and not just yes-manning me like a lump on the log. Actually, deeply, one of the things I love about you deeply is that you tell the truth. So, gosh, I got a million questions. I'd love to give you time to retort to what I just said.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, technically it wasn't a correction because in terms of cap markets, it really has been about 2 decades because the first maybe 5-8 years of my career was more on the sales, loan officer, sales management side. So you weren't wrong, but you know me, I'm always looking to sort of thread the needle, point out maybe some loose ends and connect dots.
Well, it's a good thing that people like you build bridges.
Build bridges. Thanks for having me on again. Thanks for doing this on a Sunday night, hence my glass of wine. And I'm really, I always love, we don't need a camera or a microphone to have engaging conversation. I always love speaking with you, but thanks for having me on a second time. It's flattering.
My pleasure. So I'm curious, firstly, of what your thought on this quote. Markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. Do you have any thoughts on
that?
I
mean, look, the market's never wrong is sort of another way of saying it. And, to that end, one of my principles of hedging the position, trading, MBS, things, that fall under the domain of what I do or have done, is another phrase that's been coined, that the trend is your friend. There are times where from our lens, right? And there's a saying that I know that you're well familiar with, right? There's your truth, my truth, the truth, and the facts. Oftentimes in the market, we don't know what the truth is. So, and I've quoted this before. When I used to watch CNBC, my favorite part of it was Rick Santelli, and I loved his updates from the pits in Chicago. And one day he showed this chart, and he talked about timing, very much in the way that you're talking about it. And he showed this chart, and he basically said, this is a buy, this is a sell, this is a buy, this is a sell. Same chart, just a different period of time. And part of understanding the markets and maybe navigating them in such a way where we endeavor to lose small and win big, right, is I don't know what your truth is. So we may both be sellers, but like I'm a seller at 80 and you're a seller at 60, for example. Okay. So you might, still be buying at 78. And I'm like, he's crazy. So I actually just alluded to this on one of my recent mortgage minutes. I'm like, look, as far as I'm concerned, once we get through a couple of more, inflation reports, once we get through the first one or two job reports that maybe show some cracks, and they have to be coming at some point. Once we may or may not have another bank failure or bailout. So, sort of my time frame, say, is June, July, August. And we can talk, and I can even digress into the calendar as to why, the market has more legs than your wallet does. So if I'm looking at that landscape, look, rates are going down. There's no question about it. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But I can't be resolute in this particular argument, let's just say, that they're going down tomorrow or the next day or the next week, if I think that it's very likely that the events that need to unfold for the rates to gap down aren't going to unfold for 30, 60, 90 days. So right now, I might be a seller of interest rates, a seller of bonds, shorting rates, even though in the longer scheme of things, I'm a buyer. And that longer scheme could be a month. We forget that folks are trading. There are algorithms that are tied to headlines. There are a million different reasons why the market is wrong, even though you're right. And when you fight it, and you can, and I have, but you can't fight it blindly. You have to, and to me, having a bias, and I also talk about this as well. I'm cautious with a short bias or a long bias. It just means don't stick your head in the sand. The trend is your friend. Bulls and bears make money, pigs get slaughtered. All of these phrases that have been coined really speak to what you just said.
Wow. The millions of reasons markets are wrong when you're right. How, taking that into account, how important is it for individuals in your mind to have their house in order? I mean that kind of literally as well as metaphorically, or I guess, duh. Yeah, how is it important? The question is, how important is it for individuals or institutions to have their house in order to take it opportunity as it comes?
So there was an Instagram. I like watching sort of business and or motivational, inspirational clips on Instagram. And I saw a Kobe Bryant one actually earlier today. And he just talked about pressure or lack thereof in sports and confidence or lack thereof in sports. And it really all centered around preparedness. It's like, if I look like I'm cool in this situation, it's just because I've done it 2,000 times, 10,000 times. And for those who kind of melt in the moment, it's likely because they don't trust. And the reason why they don't trust is because it's foreign to them. I think I said this, might have actually been on this podcast the last time, but I said it somewhat recently. And I said, if you stood on a pitcher's mound in the middle of Yankee Stadium and were tasked in front of 58,000 people to take a breath, you wouldn't stumble. You wouldn't panic over taking a breath. I mean, that's that's human, nature. That breath, that next breath is, all things, equal, is academic. So having your house in order for me is knowing the shot, having lived the shot, experienced it, albeit in a different context, perhaps, understanding what the next shot is if you're wrong. So if you know the chart and you have a sense of, what if, this most recent Fed decision, I really didn't predict the decision. I sort of more said, hey, this is what I think is going to happen if they do this or if they do that. And, that to me, having your house in order, being prepared, knowing what what you can risk, what you can't risk, what you're, where do you want to get out? What's your goal? All this stuff is important. I'm not going to make $1 billion trading $10 at a time. I also can't be afraid of losing $500 if I'm trading $1 billion at a time. I'm oversimplifying, but again, just that preparation allows you the clarity when necessary, the context when appropriate, not for when things go to plan. That's easy.
Wow.
But for when they don't, which is more likely.
Do you often have, so are you separating the way you're thinking? This is what I think is going to happen, but these are the questions you're asking yourself. If it doesn't go the way that I think it may.
Well,
And
sure.
then what would I do in that case?
Yeah,
Is that what you're articulating?
absolutely. And what I say to folks, when it's in the context of advocating for their borrowers, from the standpoint of should I lock, should I float their interest rate on a mortgage application. One of my principles of hedging interest rate risk from a mortgage standpoint also was, so it's kind of the trend is your friend is one of them. The other one was I'd rather be short than long. And what that meant was if I'm going to be wrong, I'd rather have the regret of saying I could have gotten a slightly lower rate than the regret of saying, oh shit, I missed the boat. Because again, when I use that chart as an example, if you have an interest rate and or whatever it might be, it may be a target price on a stock, right? And you hit that, and all these phrases, right? I've never seen anybody go broke taking profit. Okay. So
keep them coming. I'm writing them down.
So, it's sort of like, okay, you know what? We were afraid rates might go up. We were at a spot where I could afford this payment. I was happy with the rate. We maybe floated it and I made a couple bucks. I got a slightly lower rate to begin with. If we guessed wrong, I'll refinance. The average mortgage is on the books 2 to 5 years.
Wow.
There'll be a moment where the stakes aren't as great as people think they are when it comes to locking in your interest rate. Over your lifetime, unless tragically, ended sooner than expected, you will refinance multiple times. And so you look at all the folks when rates went up precipitously who missed out on a house, got pushed out of affordability. In many of those cases, it was either A, being a little bit greedy, thinking rates were going to keep going down, or B, lost chasing that interest rate that was gone. And it was like, just lock, don't look back. And there'll be plenty of opportunity to refinance if you guessed wrong. So there should be little to no regret. And if you guess right, thank God, because I was ready to move at this rate, at this payment. And that speaks to sort of behavioral economics and how we compartmentalize gains and losses in a very dysfunctional way, by the way.
What do you mean by that?
So if I, sorry,
There's the dog?
Max.
Yeah,
on a Sunday night, you wouldn't think that I'd have a delivery. It's probably somebody out there walking a dog. So if I said to you, Jay, and again, whatever context is going to be that I've set the price for something, okay? And that price, let's just say, was markedly better than you thought it was going to be. But for whatever reason, you decided to hold off. Hey, I understand that the price of this thing is fluid, and this really works well insofar as stocks or mortgage rates, right? Because they move in real time. So let's just put it in that context. You call me up, although not me literally anymore because I'm not a licensed loan officer, but let's pretend you called me up looking to refinance. I quoted your rate. That's awesome. I want to do it, but I heard rates were going to go lower. I don't know, Jay, I would lock. No, I'm going to wait. You're saving, let's just say 2%. I'm going to make the savings dramatic here for illustrative purposes. Tomorrow rates go up, and all you can think about is the 0.25% you lost, not the 1 3/4 you made. That is a real thing from a behavioral economic standpoint. Harvard did a study on it, and I forget what it's called. We literally had a borrower back in 2012 or 13 that over $500 on a $300,000 mortgage missed the boat. Just could not get over the fact that when they called us on a Thursday, it was X% with 0 fees, and rates went up on Friday, but not enough for it to be a full 0.8% in increment. So it was just an extra $500. Would have taken that borrower, and I forget the math, something like 4 months to break. All it did was cost them 4 months worth of, sort of interest, if you will, and just couldn't get himself to do it. And then ended up missing the boat and didn't refinance for another year and a half later. So you're talking about saving whatever it was, $3,000, $5,000 a year on their mortgage for 2 years. That decision cost them $10,000 over $500.
Wow.
Just obsessed with the $500 he lost.
And
he didn't lose it.
This topic specific, would you say that this affects every listener regardless of what they do, whether they realize it or not?
Yeah,
I would think anybody listening owns a house at some point.
In general, it's procrastination. I mean, forget about even in the context of mortgages. Whether you're watching this and you're going to buy a house, not buy a house, whatever, it's just procrastination, and procrastination is generally driven by that. Not seeing if you're in a position to make some sort of decision, it's extremely likely that the decision makes sense, right? If you said to me, hey, I'm going to drop a piano on your head, I'm not going to take very long to say, hey, let's not do that, right? But if you propose something to me that merits some contemplation, right? I could pretty much tell you that it's generally the human condition to overanalyze the minutia and bypass the greater benefit. Here's another one: tripping over dimes to get to pennies. This is why all these euphemisms and phrases are that way. People have figured it out over time that.
Well, you say culture has, people haven't, because we keep only getting 80 years.
Fair. Yeah, fair.
What's that make you think? I got to get in your head after that.
Well, I think that what that makes me think of is something that I say quite often, is that on a statistical basis, 9 out of 10 people are followers. So very few people have the clarity, vision, foresight to lead, to break that mold, whether it be set by culture or otherwise. Because again, in what you do, you realize that most cultures are dysfunctional. If all cultures were great, we wouldn't need Jay Doran, the culture man. Okay. So sure, we're a byproduct of our culture. We're a byproduct, of our environment, where, I forget who it was. I think it was, and he's become a bit of a controversial figure, but Kanye West, I think, told this story about, when you're a child, you think you're Superman, and you get up on top of that glass coffee table, never contemplating that you might crash through it. And those fears that we have as humans, are conditioned by the fact that we know that you can crash through the glass coffee table and hurt yourself. Now, in that context, that wisdom is priceless. But oftentimes, many of the truths that we cling to are based on a certain point of view. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Return of the Jedi.
Were you a leader at the deli? Isa, is that what it was?
Heise's Deli.
Or
Heise's
did you
Deli.
become a leader? I'm presupposing that you were a leader and are a leader today. So I just want to preface
Yeah,
that.
I mean,
Did you become that in the deli, selling the sizzle, as I remember from episode 110, season 10? I'm going to keep plugging it so people listen to that episode.
please do.
They are listening. Go over there, listen to episodes. Yeah, you were selling the sizzle, as you eloquently articulated. Did you consider yourself a leader then?
Yeah, good question. I mean, look, a leopard doesn't change its spots. So,
I'm
but
writing
no,
that down.
but no. So this was like the cool job to get. And I was one of the younger and newer guys. So in the context of the hierarchy of a bunch of minimum wage high school kids working in a deli, no, I really wasn't a leader. In the context of the job, though. So one of the funny stories was we were what Mr. Heise, Frank Heise, called the thrift shop for a company called Old Dutch Bakery. And one of the things that Old Dutch Bakery sold were half of a bundt cake. If anybody even knows in 2023 what the hell a bundt cake is, but it's a round cake with a hole in the middle, generally speaking. And it used to be a form that people would bake with at home, but in this case, it was a commercial enterprise. And they cut it in half. Cook the bundt cake, cut it in half, wrap it up, sell it. And then when it would go stale, we would buy it. And we'd sell it for 99 cents. Okay. I blew out and that wasn't the only thing they sold. They sold some other things. And I would blow them out. And you'd see opportunities arise. Okay. And we had a lot of foot traffic for guys going to construction jobs. It was like 5 apartments around and above this deli, because there was an apartment in the back, but then up top. And they were the sweetest guys. So there were a bunch of Guatemalan day workers who used to stop in every morning to get coffee and breakfast. And one day I was like, guys, you got to try these cakes, because it's 99 cents. You get half of a fucking cake. And they would scoop them up like crazy. But one of the phrases that stuck with me, I took 4 years of Spanish.
Wow.
And pretty much could not remember a word to this day. Like mucho bueno and fuego, but whatever.
I said wow because I was like, another,
Yeah,
you really had it.
But every morning they would come in, right? And you talk about how a culture forms. They'd come in and they would say amigo, right? So after them doing that for whatever, 3 straight months, I beat them to the punch, and they'd walk in, I'd go amigo, and they go amigo. And I go, what's up? And they'd always say the same thing. Mucho trabajo, poco dinero. And I was like, the fuck does that mean? Even after all that Spanish. And it was a lot of work, no money.
Wow.
And they came in every morning, and I probably, sold 20% of our Old Dutch Bakery inventory to those guys. And then everybody else, little old ladies that would come in, kids who would stop by after school, bring your mother one of these, she'll be happy. I mean, it was 99 cents for half a cake. You couldn't beat the deal. And blew them out. And Heise absolutely, everybody that would walk in, and we always mimicked his voice with a high pitch. I don't know that he actually had as high pitch a voice as we mimicked, but things take on a life of its own. And somebody walk in and he always go, hey, you go see, he called me Philly. You go see Philly about those cakes? We're the thrift shop and they're 99 cents. And I got him selling them. And the next thing you know, we literally sell like $2,000 worth of 99-cent stale cakes. So in that regard, I was a leader. But in the ecosystem, the of the push and pull of all the testosterone, there was maybe about a dozen of us or something like that, 15 of us that worked there. I was one of the lower guys on the totem pole, younger and newer to the job. And some of those guys were crazy. I mean, I always tell this story. That he used to do so much business out of this place. We'd have to stock extra milk. There was more milk and orange juice in a refrigerator. They had a big trailer out back, like a box trailer that was refrigerated. We'd store more milk, eggs, and orange juice back in that box trailer than would fit in the case by a multiple. We'd have to restock those cases almost daily. And, some of the, older kids, and you're not allowed to do this anymore. So kids at home put up a not suggested, adult supervision sticker on this or something. But back in the day, shockingly, juniors and seniors in high school might imbibe a bit in adult beverages. And inevitably somebody's older brother would go get, like a quart of vodka. And one of the guys who will remain nameless, was really into this. He'd go back there, get a quart of orange juice and make screwdrivers.
Wow.
And one night he got absolutely lit up. And, those milk crates, he had like 10 of them and he's holding them like this. And Heise on Sundays would go, he'd leave for the day. He hardly ever left the store, but he'd leave for the day. His girlfriend wanted to, he was divorced and his girlfriend wanted to make him a home cooked meal that he'd come in the next day and complain about because her meatballs were like lead sinkers, is what he would tell us. And he'd go home and then he'd say, I'll be back. And then he never came back. And then his father, who was like 150 years old, we called him the Bat. He would come back. He'd come back to close the store up. Well, one day, the guy who will remain, we'll call him Joe for
great.
Or no, actually, Heise would refer to him by his last name. And so I will call him Palmieri, even though that was not his name. And so Palmieri gets lit up, carrying these milk cartons out. The Bat was in close proximity to Palmieri, drops the milk cartons on the guy's head, splits them open. Come in the next day, I'm like, hey, what's going on, Heise? Did you hear the story? Because that fucking Palmieri almost killed my dad. So, yeah, I mean, we could have a show dedicated to colorful Heise stories.
Well, what made this so successful? Because this sounds 50 years, it was open. You're telling stories about it all these years later. That was what, 84, 85, 86? Like, why was that culture so special? It sounds like a huge success.
Well, I mean, for a while there, it was just an institution. And then it kind of took a life of its own. Because you had, I was an only child, but you had, brothers, older brothers handing, the torch down to younger brothers.
Wow, really?
Everybody from the neighborhood, and as Heise, sort of got older, he got more lenient. And I think that he lived to some extent vicariously through us, that sort of youth, the youthful enthusiasm that we had. Just crazy stuff. I mean, he had an old time stove in the back, and we used to cook these huge Thuman roast beef, and you'd have to put them in the oven and cook them. And I never cooked a thing in my life at that point. My mother cooked everything, and who knew that you had to light the pilot light in a stove? So I went and put the roast beef in there one day, turned the gas on, had no idea that for an hour and a half the gas was running. Heise always had a little cigar in his mouth, those like Tiparillos.
Oh my.
Went in there one day, opened up the thing, and like it singed his eyebrows. He came running out. He's like, what the fuck did you do? So when you have experiences like that, I mean, there's just, so many crazy stories.
You said he was always there. How important do you think that was to that environment? It sounds like a family environment.
I think it was hugely important because, we fed off of him. The fact that the fact that he got a kick out of and better yet, even fed into our stupidity and debauchery. I mean, you kind of did it for him. It was the original reality TV. And he was crazy also. Like, he swore the people across the street had it out for him. And like, we'd have to kill roaches all the time. I mean, the thing would be infested half the time. He swore the people across the street in the middle of the night would sneak roaches under the front door. It infest. I mean, he was just as crazy as we were. It's amazing, you think about conspiracy theories and how people's minds race. I mean, could you imagine that people living in the apartment building next door are so consumed with your deli that they're sneaking roaches underneath?
And you're saying that this person believed it.
I mean, to the extent that he would repeat it multiple times, I think he believed it. Either that, or he wanted to say it enough to make himself believe it, so then others believed it.
Wow. I guess in hindsight, were there certain things that you learned from that experience that you think you brought into your life moving forward? Like, did you consider this person like a role model at some level, or
yeah,
even if it was implicit?
I mean, I would say hustle. I mean, I really, even though as a paper boy, you have to hustle for your tips and so forth, kind of learning how to hustle. I mean, really, I joke about the old Dutch bakery thing, but, that was one where I really, understood the power of selling and how you could take something that's, at best a good idea and really transform it into something, important or special from a business or, potentially a life standpoint, not that particular, example, understanding a little bit, you talk about formulating culture, right? I mean, we had some people come through there that just were not, a good cultural fit, and they quickly found their way out, and vice versa. Dealing with curveballs. I mean, it was important. And then at the end, when his health began to fail, just understanding how important a business could be to family. I'd close. There were times where I'd close out and bring the money out to him because he couldn't make it back. And that's also where you learn trust. That somebody would trust you with thousands of dollars, in cash, in a day and an age where in some ways it was easier to trust, but in a lot of ways harder. It's not like there was cameras all over. I mean, easy to trust people when you have cameras all over the place, but I mean, sure. I mean, I learned a lot of what not to do. I mean, with all due respect, I mean, that place was an absolute gold mine. And then he began to neglect it.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it was a gold mine, and people were willing to pay a premium for convenience and understanding the challenges of going from, a neighborhood where you didn't own a car and you walked to the local store rather than having to walk miles to a supermarket, and get in a car that you didn't own, and so therefore you couldn't, as an example, to where, you might go 3 towns over to buy something if it's a little bit cheaper. And so, how do you deal with that adversity? Do you stay on brand? Do you lean into the brand? Or do you give in to the pressure? And, he gave in to the pressure. All of a sudden, quality went down, and that suffered. And we went from being the neighborhood go-to to, really more of just that, a convenience store. It was only a store out of convenience if you had to. And over that 2, 3, 4 year period that I was there, not a long period of time, by the way, probably 2 years, I think, maybe 3 at the most. You're talking maybe freshman year to beginning of junior year, I think, is probably the time frame. just a precipitous change in the dynamic of that business. I mean, literally in that short period, printing money, being a stalwart, a go-to, to a place that, you kind of only went to if you had to.
Did he get divorced sophomore year?
No. The way before. Yeah. Way before.
I want to pivot because I don't think I've been fair enough, even in the last episode, to the audience that may not know you like I do. Can you explain to the layperson what it is that you actually do and like your background?
I mean, if I explain
in the context of the chief investment officer.
If I explain that, then I give away everything. No, I'm just kidding. Well, insofar as a chief investment officer for a mortgage company, it could be different things for different companies, and depending on the scale, the scope, the complexity of your business. In the context of EPM, I hedge our interest rate risk. It means when you apply for a mortgage or through either a broker or a loan officer, and they lock your loan with us, there's a moment or many moments in time between that lock and when you close and fund, and when we securitize the loan. So what happens to interest rates in that period of time says a bit about what we can or can't make on your loan. So we have to hedge that margin, that interest rate. So that risk is, and hedging that risk is part of what I do. Then you have, okay, once all these loans close and fund, what do you do with them? What we might call dispose of them. Sounds, a bit more terminal than the reality of it. It means we take them from us and transfer the economics of it elsewhere, whether it be vis-a-vis a security. And that's most of what we do. We take one loan and put it together with many other loans and issue what's called a mortgage-backed security, an MBS, for example, a Ginnie Mae MBS. And so many of these get put into what are called multi-issuer bonds, which means us and 20 other companies just put all of these loans into this multi-issuer pool that banks and credit unions and individuals and whoever might invest in. So I handle the oversight of that disposal of loans, that securitization or selling of those loans. I set the price. What are our rates? And then what we're left with is the servicing, because what many people don't understand is that the loan, the mortgage, the MBS, and the servicing really are two different things. Because, Jay, if you invested in mortgages, it's not like I'm going to send my payment to you. We need a repository to collect these payments in a uniform and reportable way. So if you're a servicer, you're that repository. So even though I've sold the loan, I've securitized the loan to one or many other buyers, investors, the payments are still made to me, us. And then we collect those payments. There's an accounting process. You remit the interest to those bondholders, and you kind of keep what's left over. So because bonds are issued in 0.5-point increments, 4, 4.5, 5, and 4 1/4, 4 3/8, 4 5/8, 4 3/4 possibly goes into the 4, and then 4 3/4. So there's a rate that can go into either 4 3/4 to 5 3/8. 5 1/4 goes into the 4.5. So I'm paying the bondholders 4.5. I'm collecting 4 3/4. That excess goes to us, the servicer. Of course, dare I say, don't want to offend any of my paisans from New Jersey. It turns out that banking is not much unlike the so-called mafia that doesn't exist. Is there's a VIG that you have to pay the insurer. So Fannie and Freddie sort of insure conventional loans. Ginnie pools government loans. HUD insures them. That's a little weird and tricky how that works. But Ginnie, for example, takes 6 basis points of the 25, the 37 and a half, the 50, and then we get what's left over.
Would you say that it's a stressful job? Like for the average person, could they even fathom?
So, yes and no. For sure, I'm sure some find it very stressful. I mean, I can tell you that there have been many emails and articles written about how stressful October, November, December, even January and February were for doing what I do. I actually found it fun and easy. So again, it comes back to the first, topic we discussed. A lot of it has to do with preparation. A lot of it has to do with what understanding, identifying, and accepting your risks and your opportunities. Knowing the shot, knowing the follow-up, not getting greedy, not sweating the small stuff, having been here before, having that wisdom, that experience. You talk about I'm hedging hundreds of millions of dollars a day. I'm securitizing similar. Essentially all of the money of the organization kind of flows through me. So is that a stress? And the market is unpredictable. And the Fed is even more unpredictable. So
I'm getting stressed out just listening to you.
Is that stressful? For some.
I wanted to watch Trading Places in preparation. The issue is I committed not to watch television for a period of time. We can unpack that maybe on the next episode. I mean, there's so many ways to skin the cat, at least, and maybe you could explain to the audience never heard of that movie, but do you feel like in hindsight, you're exactly where you thought you'd be in your vision, or is there a level of pride, I guess, because you've accomplished so much, go back, not, in a band and then deciding not to go that route as the rock star, but today to have this level of responsibility. I know for the audience, bear with me. Phil will explain why I'm bringing up this movie and all this.
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is yes and no. Okay. So in the context that might say my first dream was to be a baseball player, probably not. Then I wanted to be a rock star, probably not. And then I wanted to be on Wall Street. Well, really not, but I'm close. Could I have envisioned? I said this when I introduced Ric Flair at 3 years ago. I think it was 2020 or 2021, one or the other. Yeah, I think it was 20. Okay. No, I think it was 21 actually. When I introduced Ric Flair, I said, I've come a long way from being that fat little kid sitting in front of my television, 25-inch television in Fairview, New Jersey, watching at 6:05, rooting for Dusty Rhodes, by the way, at the time, but admiring and respecting Ric Flair. To have an opportunity to introduce him as our first, spokes celebrity brand ambassador at EPM. or, some of the really cool stuff I've been fortunate enough, to do. I mean, and as Jenna sort of orchestrates all my social media moves and, talking about wine. And I'm sort of and for quite some time, I've been an avid wine collector and wine drinker. And, I've got, Chapelet and Joseph Phelps and Max Riedel commenting on some of my posts. I mean, first of all, who would have thought about a posting on Instagram? What the hell is Instagram or whatever, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But yeah, I mean, for sure, if you're just talking about a ruler, a non-denominational, nondescript measure of, total consciousness, as Bill Murray says in Caddyshack, I would say that I far exceeded my best expectations. Did I hit all the high notes that I would have expected to or had endeavored to along the way? No, not necessarily. I was just watching something, and I actually don't remember what it was, but I was watching some content and it really made me come to a realization. And a question that people so often ask is, do you have any regrets? And I really don't, because I can honestly say that I don't have any regrets that I could control. Do I have some regrets about things that I could not have controlled, or, certainly, had I known, would I have spent more time with my father in the months leading up to it? Stuff like that. Yeah, sure. Right. Would I have bought Apple in 1978 and held on to it? Yeah, great. I don't have any regrets per se, other than this, and this is my biggest regret, is I didn't enjoy it and appreciate it as much. That moment. And when I say that moment, at 51 years of age, whatever that math is, 51 times 365 times 60 times 60, I've always been someone that prefers the journey versus the destination. And so I'm always looking ahead, reveling in that moment and understanding now, when you're 18, you're invincible. Now at 51, I think about mortality. I think about all the time that's passed, more so than the time that's coming. And I said this at TAG, where I am at times misunderstood in business and in life, is I so love everything about life. I want to experience everything. I have a highly addictive personality. And I've said this before, which is crazy that first of all, I've never taken a drug, never mind been addicted to a drug. But, you would think that I'd be a classic candidate for drug, alcohol, or gambling addiction. None of the above. Love alcohol, hate getting drunk. I really try my best to not get a buzz, to not get drunk. But love scotch, love wine, love, Hawaiian, sort of beach drinks, love a great, gin and tonic. Love beer, but I don't like what those things do to you. So I try to avoid the buzz or getting drunk and stuff like that. But a highly addictive personality. And I say there are times where I feel like I'm being suffocated in a way like it's sort of quicksand, because I want more. I want more experience. I want more out of business. I want more out of life. And I think that that insatiable appetite, that absolute love, unbridled passion for just how fortunate we are to live life, even with all the ups and downs, that I've been remiss to not really try to slow things down. and just give it a breath, give it a minute, and not worry that tomorrow is going to be the best day because we're doing X. I found myself rushing through the slow days, and you have many more gaps in life than you have highlights, and rushing through some of those slower days to get to what I thought were the highlights. And now with the benefit of hindsight, you realize that those real highlights were those slow moments, oftentimes.
If I were to pose to you, Buffett started getting his stride at 50. With that knowledge, whether you had it before I mentioned that or not, does that excite you, or are you more so thinking, I can't see myself on a stage at 93? Like I'm going to go to Omaha this year, hopefully like May 6th, like to see the rock god. So when I bring that up, do you think like, oh, wow,
Well,
or I'm personally curious.
I don't know that that's my path. And when I say that, not because I don't see myself retiring, maybe ever. Okay. What I mean though, are the things that many of the things that I have a real passion for are physical, golf, being out and about, playing the guitar, stuff like that, being able to, throw a ball with Nick or go out and play golf with Thomas. Not to say that there aren't 70, 80, 90-year-olds playing golf, but I think that in a lot of ways, my best days in those pursuits are soon behind me. So, look, I don't know, in 10 years, would I find that being more fun, being up on stage with, fill in the blank, maybe. I've always been more of a doer though. So in that regard, if you said to me that, hey, in 10 years, you're going to get into Augusta National, okay? And you're going to be one of the folks that hosts the Masters, and you're going to sit there and you're going to talk about golf with the last 30 Masters champions, for example, right? As awesome and great as that might be, it's not as great as had I gotten to Augusta 20 years ago and was able to play golf at Augusta. I want to experience it. I want to do it. I don't want to necessarily teach it. That doesn't mean that I don't teach. I'm adverse to teaching or that I'm not a good teacher. I enjoy that, but I'm a doer. And really the one thing I wanted to say to finish the original question, because we digressed a bit, I've joked and said, I'm probably the most broke market predictor, that's kind of ever lived, right? In 2005, I predicted the financial crisis. Michael Burry did much better than I did in the financial crisis. We'll just put it that way.
And a few other people.
Yeah, and a few other people. If you look at, and I've said this, now, yes, my best years in this industry have been in those down years. 2008, phenomenal. We experienced, explosive, parabolic growth at the money store. 11.
After, or that was during it. That was when
well, all of these successes, the path was laid before. And so we were there, we were ready, and then boom.
So when other people were going out of business, you were booming up, you're saying?
Booming, yeah.
Oh, I want to unpack that.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
So 08, 11, 14, 16, 18, 20, 23 right now, and you see the business that we're doing and how we're breaking,
Yes.
we're breaking the mold, we're breaking out. So when you look at it, I mean, when I in 18, excuse me, it was right before COVID. Well, I started having these conversations in 18, but October of 19, I started calling and going around to car dealerships and watch dealers. And I'm like, when you're ready for a deal, I'm here. Now, those cracks had already started to form because I actually bought a car that I didn't intend to buy. Didn't get, and at first it was like, no, these things are going for over sticker and this and that. And it was like, I ended up getting it for under sticker. And then they were trying to give me, basically give away another car. So those cracks were already forming, but the initial response was, you're crazy. Everything is great. Same thing with November of 21. You know, I said, hey, the downturn has started. And we're going to sell our servicing. Everybody thought we were that I was crazy. We sold it in February of 22. I've had 2 market participants say to me that might have been like the best MSR sale ever. Now, that's saying a lot. I don't know that I believe that. But did I sell it at the absolute top of this market? 100%. 100%. And everybody that held on through the summer totally missed the boat. So when you, and believe me, nobody's crying for me, and I'm not on food stamps. But
No, I'm upset.
But when
I'm upset a little bit.
Yeah, but when you consider how many times I've been right, you know, on CNBC in August of 05, I said to Ron and Sana, the Fed's going to wake up one day and say, what did we do? You know, in that regard, if I was some big fancy bond, had I realized that goal of being Billy Ray or Lewis, I would have probably been a billionaire based on those calls. But like, so do you regret that? Of course not, because they might have thrown me out. You know, it's like that. Like, that's the thing is, this is all a dance. 1 + 1 = 3. Right? I just have the thought, I need a vehicle. I need the platform. You know, that's why, you know, Eddie and I, and now others, I just talked about this at EPMX, KD, you know, and others in the past, is like, we are better together, right? And I could sit here as I did, and this is an example. It was sort of like I had the idea, we monetized it, but, you know, you see some of the money that folks made in COVID, you know, just because they were in an opportunity, billionaires made, you know, it's like, I called that. So, you know, in that regard, no, I didn't hit the high note, maybe the ultimate high note yet.
How important is,
yet?
I'm there with you, but like, yeah, we're smiling for a reason, for many reasons. How important is, my question, your answer, right there at the end? You could have just not said that last piece. You could have omitted that you could have just not said that last, but like you just told the truth. You know, how important is that self-awareness and that, what do you call that? You call that honesty, or is it vulnerability and courage? Like, maybe I'm reading into, well, of course I'm reading into it.
Yeah.
Like, how important is it to say it ultimately in that answer, no, I haven't hit the high note? When there's so many things that, and I'm going to be here and say, dude, in my opinion, you're hitting high notes every day, because that's my observation of you and so many other people. Ultimately, you said, no, I haven't. And then you're saying, yeah, which yeah, damn right. But like you said, no, I haven't. How important is it to have the self-awareness and then the honesty to tell the whole world that's listening something that they easily wouldn't have come to that conclusion on their own. I don't think that people would be looking at you as a successful, very, very, very successful person by any metric. Like,
in my observation, by and large, the world's most successful business people were the ones that sold themselves. I love Steve Jobs, and what I see in Steve Jobs was that he had a vision. And to be unadulteratedly, unapologetically, the best, the most forward thinking to a fault. And yeah, I mean, what's the word? I think you could distill it down into courage. Courage allows you to be honest. And it goes back to that Kobe Bryant thing, again, is that preparation allows you to not choke. That courage allows you to say, this is who I am. If you like it, jump on my back, hold my hand, let me get on your back, and let's go. If you don't, fuck you. I don't care. It's that clarity of, you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all of the people all of the time.
What is that, Aristotle?
I mean, it might be.
I'm pretty sure.
It might be that, or it might be a McDonald's Happy Meal in the back of a Happy Meal, but or a fortune cookie. It's sort of like coming to the realization that I need half the people to embrace me. If I could bat 500, and you don't even have to do that, but if I could bat 500, I'm going to be successful. So I'm going to be me, because Jay, in my truth, I need to win over my people.
Powerful.
If I am not me, I don't have people. I don't. You have nothing as far as I'm concerned. You have a charade.
Purgatory. Charade.
You have a house of cards that, see, and again, there aren't absolutes. There are people that are wealthier than I that were built on a house of cards. You have people that haven't come crashing down, that have never lived the truth. But I look at it and being a numbers guy, being a probability guy, here's what I see in my truth. Those people that don't follow their light, their path, the likelihood of success, the probability of success, far less than the ones who are themselves. So it's not a matter of can't. It's a matter of what's most probable, what's most likely. And so, look, I'm a cursor. I don't stop cursing for anybody. I mean, maybe if I was in front of the Pope, I mean, maybe, okay? Maybe if the Dalai Lama, okay? But I'm an unapologetic cursor. And if you're a cursor, you're on Team Mancuso and I'm on Team you. And if I'm a cursor and I'm not, I don't do it, I don't say what I want to say, I don't say it how I want to say it. And that's palpable at some point. And you have to be really, really, really smart to be a liar, to remember every lie. And I'm sorry, it's just not my path. I am who I am. And that's all that I am.
You mentioned Pops. He's no longer with us. What did he do? Was he like you?
I mean, look, I think that
you're a unique person in my view.
Yeah,
in a good way.
Thank you. We're all a product of I would imagine we're all a product of our parents, right? I would say that if anything, I might even be more like my mother than my father, in that she's a little bit crazy and fiery. And whereas my father was, so I would say the sort of the cynical, calculated, thoughtful, nostalgic, measured elements of my personality, judgmental, come from him, and the outgoing lunatic elements of my personality come from my mother. And so there's a mix there.
How'd they end up in Fairview? We were neighbors practically. I was raised in Cedar Grove.
Yeah, which
Belleville,
my last
Dunwoody.
house was Wayne.
Willowbrook Mall.
Yeah,
Used to throw the pennies in there.
yeah. So they came to Fairview because they started in North Bergen. Although my mother started in Fairview, at some point somebody came off a boat, and that's kind of where they landed.
What's the background?
I'm mostly Sicilian, so don't piss me off. No,
it's amazing. I was gonna say it.
I have my cousin.
Yeah, I totally thought that.
My cousin Jack and Vinny.
I'm half Italian.
Well, that
my
makes,
father. He's
that
out there somewhere.
That makes some sense. So I'm mostly Sicilian, but a small my maternal grandfather was Croatian, but everybody else was Sicilian, to the extent that we know they were Sicilian. We didn't have 23andMe back then, but at least for several generations, we, sort of.
When did your mom's parents come over? Do you know?
No, actually, if I am not mistaken, all the parents were born here. It was the grandparents that came over, and maybe even in some respects the great grandparents.
And so now, if I look behind you, I see these beautiful palm trees. Are you going back to Jersey?
Never. I don't even want to. I've stepped foot in New Jersey twice since we moved down here. One time for 15 minutes, and the other time for 2 or 3 days.
I'm going to bring this. I definitely want to not end on a low note. So let's go past the Northeast. 2023, you had mentioned some times of opportunity. What is the opportunity in 2023 as you see it? 2024, do these times excite you? And then what would be your advice to people listening to this that may, or whether they're in the industry that you're, operating within or not? Let's try to make this practical to the audience as well.
Well, you talk about Omaha and you talk about Warren Buffett, and it's very simple. Be greedy when people are fearful, and fearful when people are greedy. So when I talk about those periods of time in my career, 05, 06, 07, a lot of neg-am loans, so-called liar loans, 125% seconds. In my 7 years at the money store, we closed 2 negative amortization loans, and I got on the phone with both borrowers trying to talk them out of it. Matt Kirchner,
Wow.
who didn't believe in the product. Matt Kirchner, who was our rep from Washington Mutual. I always joke that this should have been a scene in The Big Short. He came to our office one day, I want to say 07, and said, hey, I'm getting pressure. We may have to shut you off. And when you hear that from a counterparty in the mortgage business, right away, oh my God, are our loans bad? Did you find fraud? I mean, what's going on? It's like, we don't make enough money on your loans. They're too plain vanilla. Wow. We don't get any neg-am. We don't get any stated income from you. And they're the biggest bank failure in the history of the world.
Holy, what was that company called?
Washington Mutual. True
I
story.
didn't tee you up. I'm just curious.
True story on my kids. Came to the office, wanted to shut us off because our business was too vanilla. And I always found the mortgage industry to be very easy. When I first got into it, mind you, I was more refi than purchase way back when. How could you not be? You're taking everybody at 10, 12, 18% and giving them 8. I said, let me get this straight. I'm going to make thousands of dollars saving people money. Don't have to sell anybody anything. Jay, instead of paying him $1,000 a month, you're going to pay me $800. I'm not going to charge anything to do it. How's that sound? Great? Great. Good. Oh, and then here's $5,000 deposited into my checking. I mean, I've said this before. My first commission check in the business was $12,000. I was a freshman in college, working part-time in 1990. I was making for a year and a half $600, $500, $700 a week, working 12 hours a week, Monday through Thursday, 3 hours a night telemarketing, $50, $60, $70 an hour in a given week in 1988.
In high school.
A good part-time job, a good full-time job was making $30,000, $35,000 a year. So when you look at, I've said, it's so easy to be successful in this industry. I never had to do anything crazy. I never had to do anything risky. And it was quite the opposite. So in the lead up to 2008, we didn't do all the stupid shit that everybody else did. Wow. So that's why we were able to take advantage. We added something like 300 offices and 5,000 employees in 6 months. In 2016, here at EPM, that's really where wholesale took off for us. We were prepared for Brexit. In 2018, it was a tough market for mortgages. We got through it because, we saw it coming and we sort of tightened the ship coming out of 16 and that refi boom. And then, the big one was I was on a call, a BWG call in, again, August. August is when I have all my good thoughts. So maybe that's when next time you have me on in August, because it twice happened in August. But I said, the next crisis is going to be driven by MSR valuation and student debt. I said, it's just MSRs are too hot. The prices everybody are paying. And that was almost everybody's undoing. Those MSR margin calls, spring of 20. So we sold all of our servicing and we just kind of laid in wait. That didn't mean that we hit the pause button. We did business. Don't get me wrong. We did a lot. 19 was a good year for EPM. But boom, 20 hit. Literally everybody was running for the hills, and you use the Trading Places reference. And so to come back to that, at the end of the movie, if you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it, but the protagonists are sort of have their way, and they're just picking and choosing, buy, and that's what we were in EPM. We were one of the singular sources of government liquidity in, end of March, April, May, really through June in the industry. Singularly because we were in the position to do so. We were greedy. We were fearful when others were greedy. So in that moment, we were able to be greedy when everyone else was fearful. And so when we sold our servicing, pretty much a year ago today, it was maybe February, it was top of the market. Everybody was greedy. and God forbid rates gap down here. And we are heading towards that. Once again, there are folks that missed the boat, didn't sell, paid crazy prices. And you're seeing it with these bank failures. They just thought it was never going to end, or they were reaching for some yield. And I don't know how you reach for yield at 2.5, but you have this 2.5, 3% debt on the balance sheets that have these, had these bullshit duration assumptions. I mean, these are only going to be on the books for 3 years. It's like, what's wrong with you? And then they started chasing their losers and didn't dump it when they could have and should have. And here you go again. And we've cleared the decks again. And you've already seen it. Word on the street is going to be announced this week. A large public company is undergoing an asset sale. The third or fourth largest, closed their wholesale about 6 months ago. Another one closed the doors. And here we are, the little engine that could, mostly because we just took the contrarian play. And part of that is where you come in, the culture of it, trying to be ourselves, trying to lead by example, trying to put hashtag lives, not loans, people ahead of business. Not perfect there. Don't always do it. But the whole price value argument is rooted in culture. It's rooted in the benefit that people see, whether it be product or service, in the experience of interacting with you and or your company. The plug for Culture Matters.
Bill, I have so much gratitude for you, because if not for you and people like you, the opportunity for culture wouldn't exist. So thank you. Thank you. Double thank you for that. I have so many, I wish I could re-listen to everything that you just said. It was the coolest thing about what you're explaining right now is that it's all true. And it's astounding and amazing. And it's amazing to even be in somewhat proximity of it. And I just realized when you were breaking all of this down that I wanted to ask you about SVB Bank and all these things. And I completely forgot in the last, hour and a half, because there's so many unbelievably interesting things that you have to say. They're also useful for our audience. In the couple minutes that we have left, what exactly is going on with the banking system right now? And maybe somebody is thinking about quitting. Maybe they're complete, someone listening to this needs to hear you right now. That would be where I could direct this for the audience, right?
So let me say this, and I'm going to take this perhaps in a different direction than you might otherwise think. Being a numbers guy, being a cap markets guy, right? I'm going to do this. Unplug from the fucking matrix. Okay. So all of these bank failures, 2008, the world is hidden in plain sight. Okay. I just watched The Big Short last week again. And when you see those guys go down to Florida to see if there's a bubble, and they go into a community, tumbleweed. Michael Burry, and that was Baum. Michael Burry, although that's Mark Baum, that's not his name in real life, but that was the character. Michael Burry, who is the character and the real guy, actually read the mortgage bonds, if you will, saw the underlying loans. And his main investor says, who reads mortgages? Right? It was all there. It was all there. I say this, and it served me well. okay? Christmas time, I walk in, Best Buy, Bloomingdale's, Macy's, whatever. How's business? How's business? Ask and ye shall receive. Knock and the door will be open. If business is bad at the Best Buy in Orlando, I can't guarantee that it's bad at the Best Buy in Beverly Hills, but directionally it probably is, unless something's going on in Orlando. There's a nuclear reactor here and it melted down. Like Detroit. Detroit's an outlier. They used to sell cars and they don't anymore. I get it. But if you're talking any town USA, if things are great or bad, they're probably great or bad in many other places. And when we moved down here 2 years ago, there was a line out, and people make fun of me. They call this like the Gucci index because they think I'm, crazy or an idiot or both. And it's like, I just keep saying, it's like, yeah, the Gucci store is empty or the Gucci store is full. And they're like, it's like when we first moved down here, there was a line of hundreds of people out the door, out the mall at Gucci. 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, went to the mall, not only not a line, but nobody in Gucci. If that's not a sign, Jay, I don't know what is. Walked into another store, talked to the sales rep that we're friends with, and he's like, yeah, we're doing pretty good. They're a store that's a little bit recession proof, a little bit. He said, but I've been here 3 years, never saw the mall this slow. So everybody else is trapped in the fucking report, dude. This is what the CPI says. No, this is what my mall says. How can inflation be 6% if the mall's empty? Something's going to give at some point. I've got to go where the puck is going, not where the puck has been or is. Wayne Gretzky. And we are so afraid to call bullshit. We are so plugged into the matrix. We think that people are crazy to be conspiracy theorists. I mean, hell, Elon Musk has uncovered half the conspiracy theories of Twitter.
Yeah.
Except the people that don't believe it and now say that that's a conspiracy. Okay. That's the irony of that. Is that Elon Musk is trying to ruin the world, so he's lying about uncovering the conspiracy. That's the conspiracy theory, the counter-conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, I don't know. If everybody was good, we wouldn't have murders. If everybody wasn't greedy, we wouldn't have robberies and thefts. So if I said to you, Jay, your best friend is going to kill you, God forbid, the average person wouldn't believe it. They wouldn't. Now, your appraisal and assessment of the situation, once you get over the shock of that contemplation, should be, are we at odds? What's happened? And then you could sort of figure out, okay, is this sound logic, or is this somebody, taking the piss, as they say, across the pond? And so it's like, it's shocking. It's shocking that we're at a point on Twitter where we want to believe everything the politicians say if they're on your side. Since when do we trust politicians? We want to believe everything that's written. Since when do we trust the rags, so to speak? They're called the rags for a reason. Social media is perhaps the greatest rag. But it's also the greatest source of truth. And so I just, it's shocking to me how simultaneously aware yet unaware we are, and how afraid. And if you ask me which I'd prefer to be, I'd prefer to be more aware than unaware. I'd prefer to be more skeptical. I would prefer to, because it comes back to also, sort of what I said. If you understand your risks and your rewards, and I always try to lose small, win big, I find that cynic in me generally promotes a lose small, win big, potentiality versus just fiddling while Rome is burning is generally the adverse. And I've never seen a more uninformed moment in time in my 51 years. And it's ironic. We've never had more access to more information. I'll say it here and I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember Corey Pavin. I was like, who's Corey Pavin? Wait a second. You're a golfer. You play golf. You don't know who the fuck Corey Pavin is? He was one of the more successful golfers of the 80s and 90s. I know who W.C. Fields is. I was born in 1971. When I was a kid, I knew who W.C. Fields was. No such thing as the internet. How do you not know who Corey Pavin, Don Mattingly, some of these kid baseball players, they don't know who Don Mattingly is. I mean, just the best baseball player for a 5-year period for the best franchise in the history of baseball. That's how uninformed we are at this point, yet having access. It's insanity. And then when we want to doubt, we're criticized and ostracized. It makes no sense. So that's my answer. And I'm sorry for being long-winded about it, because I was actually trying to give you a short answer, but that's also...
I think that's a pretty succinct...
That's also the enigma of Phil Mancuso, if you will, not to talk of myself in the third person, but I could sit here and digress about the failure of SVB and others. The real answer is it was fucking hidden in plain sight.
The economic or the cultural cracks are not revealed until the economic crises.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And you want to hear something even
like
crazy?
Wouldn't you say that what would be behind an SVB, hypothetically or possibly could have been bureaucracy? It's because it sounds like they invested in pretty mediocre instruments, didn't have a compliance officer for 8 months, and then the Fed lowered the value, acro, right?
Yeah, I haven't looked that much at their investment strategy to say whether or not it was ill-fated or otherwise. I would say that it sure as hell looks like they didn't hedge their interest rate risk soundly. That's one.
That's kind of the reason I'm going there, is because I just want to see if I'm following your theme here, which is tremendous opportunity because so many people are not prepared for basic cycle.
For sure, one. Like one of the things
is that one of the themes that you're saying here?
100, dude, 100%. Because look, I'll tell you what, you could pull a calendar, and for the last 10, 20 years, you could almost set a clock to, regardless of what's happening in the world. Interest rates go down middle of December through January, up February through March, down April through May, up June to July, down July through September, up October to December. You could almost set a clock by it. In fact, in one of my minutes, I said in the middle of January, I said, look, I'd be locked up here. I'd be short because February is not a rate-friendly month. I said St. Patty's Day, and really almost to the day. I was probably 3 days late on that call. And part of it, again, is what you said of going back, the market having more legs than your wallet. Okay. Here's one of the reasons, dude. You turn of the year, you get all these seasonal adjusters. Okay. You have people buying stuff for Christmas. People want to feel good. So it stands to reason that, you feel good about the economy in October, in November, in December, and then the numbers reflect that in November, in December, in January or February. And then all of a sudden, we also have these seasonal adjusters and these population adjusters. Like a dirty secret is that jobs report, and I've talked a lot about how imperfect it is, but the other one was it gets revised like 20 times. It's not only the first once or two times, it gets revised a whole year plus after that. And you can go on BLS's website and see that pretty much every January, 10 months from now, gets revised down massively. So, are people lying? Is it the Matrix? Who knows? Who cares? I'm smart enough, so to speak. Fool me once, shame on, you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I've been fooled by that.
Are we forgetting potential? Could we be so close to the content that we miss the context of the meta,
Bingo.
Which is politics and culture? Like this is why I thought the Fed was going to go up, and I'm not an expert in any of this. Culturally, I believe that there's so much behind continuing to increase that a lot of the people that are geniuses within the content, they might be a bit too rational. Maybe that's subconsciously why I picked this quote today, if I think about that out loud. We have to be a little less rational now, I think, if we're going to make predictions. I don't know. I want your thoughts on that. And then we're going to have to wrap up what do you call it? Like, we should leave this as a cliffhanger because I want you back sooner than August because I want to respect your time. And selfishly, I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes off this because I like you more than the audience by a long mile. So just can you give us final thoughts on that? And then,
So I had made the call logically back in June or July that the Fed was going to cut in March. And I look back and regret, so that might be one of the things I regret, is not using the word easing. I should have used the word easing because you could logically argue that despite the Fed's rate increase, that they actually eased monetary policy. Why? They indirectly bought like $350 million worth of bonds in the last week or so. Okay. And see, Max is pissed off by Jay Powell and his cronies too. So they have now put back on their balance sheet in the month of March, more than or roughly half of the QT, the tightening, the bonds they got off the balance sheet in the last year. Okay. And in fact, there's been more stimulus to the banks, more backstop in the last 2 weeks than in 2008 or during COVID. So if you don't think that we're in the shit, if you don't think that the Fed is eased, then, folks, you're not looking at the reality of things. We've also had the second and third, and if you count Credit Suisse, because it effectively was a bank failure, the 3 of the 4 biggest bank failures ever, and the only other one was 2008. And so, at the end of the day, the Fed has eased here. The bravado there is one of those nothing to see here sort of things. And, having been, a party to and or an observer of several business closings, bank failures. One of my first jobs at Carteret Savings Bank, the RTC closed the place down, literally right behind me. Came in, got home from school. When I did go to class, I'd go home, get changed, put on a suit, head out to the office. About 11, 12 o'clock, on my way out to Parsippany, pull up into the lot, get into the office, hit the elevator button, elevator door opens at my floor, and everybody's standing there waiting for me. And I'm like, what's going on? They're like, did you see who just came in behind you? I'm like, no. Something like 25, 30 Suburbans came behind me. It was the RTC, the Resolution Trust Company, to shut down Carteret Savings Bank. So, by the way, 3 days before that, everything was great. When Salmons Enterprises, Inc. bought Parkway, the month before they shut us down, we had opened a new office. Everything is great. So folks, you want to talk about why we need to unplug from the matrix, why you need to have have at least some degree of skepticism about what folks, are telling you is the truth, in an at-large forum, is, almost every time somebody says there's nothing to worry about, there's something to worry about. And so, Jay, in that regard, I'll say, just to digress for a second, the irony of SVB is that it's come out that, like, in the last 2 months, the Fed was concerned about SVB. Nobody heard about it. Nobody knew about it. Again, all this is in plain sight. It's on there. It's a footnote in B of A's financials. It's the great Ronald Reagan said, "Trust but verify." I just watched a clip of him earlier today. He said we'd be better off, if the government took 3 weeks off. Just take 3 weeks off and come back. We'll figure it out.
Phil, this has been a rousing episode of the Culture Matters podcast. I implore the listeners, please go listen to episode 110, season 10. Come back around for this. Wow, 2 totally different conversations. Thank you so much, Phil, for agreeing to do this again, and we'll see you long before August for sure. We're gonna get you back.
I appreciate it. I always love speaking with you. If I could get in a plug, because I know that this is near and dear to Jenna. Okay. Follow my Instagram, @elpresidente_EPM, because Jenna does an awesome job helping with that, and she's the content guru. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I do the Market Minute. I do wine reviews. I do golf reviews. Maybe more is going to come. Jen and I have talked a lot about that. We have a very similar sense of humor, even though I'm not Jewish, although some might argue that fact. I kind of have that New York Jewish sense of humor, that Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David kind of sarcastic.
Yeah, our kids are going to think you're in the tribe with them. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
So we have a lot of fun just saying stupid things and laughing about it with each other. So
can you end on a market minute? Actually, is that possible, or am I pushing?
I mean, it's Sunday night. What the hell's going on in the markets? Let me see.
I mean, it's kind of like a theme, and frankly, I think you're one of the few that I follow on the internet that would even do anything like, that even does that. Right?
All right.
On command. Phil's about to do his market minute. You got to follow Phil every day. Updates all of us on what is going on in a minute, sometimes a little longer, but please end it on that, friend. Longer.
All right, you ready?
Yes, sir.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Mancuso Market Minute, coming at you like a freight train, just like Sunday night, okay? The little sleepies and the snoozies that are coming for me like a freight train. But it's, markets are getting ready to open up in Asia and then over in Europe. Right now, it looks like bonds are slightly flat. They're kind of indicating just a little bit off. Nothing really matters until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, unless something crazy goes on. We ended Friday being a little bit worried about Deutsche Bank as possibly being the next failure. So to me, or bailout, that might be the news in the overnight that might move us here in the domestic. As far as here domestically, my eyes are on Friday. Not a ton of data this week. There's a couple Fed reports, and if you follow me, I like those Fed district reports. There's some other stuff in there, some housing. It's the rare week where we don't get the jobs report the end of the last week of the month. Usually it comes in the first week, but not when it's like late. But we don't have any jobs data this week. We do have PCE on Friday. That's historically the Fed's preferred measure of inflation. And really all eyes for me are on that in the absence of another bank bailout or failure. So until then, bulls and bears make money, pigs get slaughtered, figures lie and liars figure. Choo choo.
We will see you all in the next episode of the Culture Matters podcast.